As you are turning to Hosea chapter 5, remind everyone that's in the choir we will be practicing tomorrow night at our normally scheduled time, 6:30. And if you will be in prayer for me, I will be preaching at Whitesburg Park in Kentucky. Riverside Park, I think they call it, Tuesday night at 5:30. Hosea chapter 5. We are in God's courtroom. Last week we looked at the co-conspirators, and we were in the middle of looking at the charges that he lays out. If you'll remember, we're jumping around a little bit because I wanted to put the sections together. And you'll see why I did that here in just a minute. But you have a group of individuals that we saw in verse 1 that are hard-working in their heresy. They set a snare, and they have been planning a trap, and they've really been working hard to corrupt Israel. And then in verse 2, he uses language to show how crafty and cruel they are. Profound and slaughter. Profound means a deep thing. It's very, very calculated, very intricate. Thought to be hidden so that folks wouldn't see and wouldn't know and wouldn't be aware of what their real intentions were. And then slaughter is intentional killing. And there's not really any way that you can butter it up or sugarcoat it. I mean, it is what it says it is. Their intentions, obviously, are catastrophic loss of life from the sin that is rampant in the nation. In verse 2, we saw how persistent they were. And even though God is trying to restrain them and he is trying to rebuke them, they won't listen to any of the prophets. They won't listen to his word. And he has increasingly been more drastic with the judgments, and yet still they will not turn to him. And in verse 3, we see their unfaithfulness, and he uses the whoredoms, the idolatry, and the adultery. And then he adds another word, defiled. They're filthy. They are not fit to worship or serve. And so we're going to finish up the charges, and then we're going to look at the witnesses, and we're going to see the conclusion that he comes to. Let's read verses 1 through 7 of Hosea chapter 5 together. Hear ye this, O priests, and hearken, ye house of Israel, and give ye ear, O house of the king. For judgment is toward you, because you have been a snare on Mizpah, and a net spread upon Tabor. The revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all. I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me. For now, O Ephraim, thou committest whoredom, and Israel is defiled. They will not frame their doings to turn unto their God. For the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them, and they have not known the Lord. The pride of Israel does testify to his face. Therefore shall Israel and Ephraim fall in their iniquity. Judah also shall fall with them. They shall go with their flocks and with their herds to seek the Lord, but they shall not find him. He hath withdrawn himself from them. They have dealt treacherously against the Lord, for they have begotten strange children. Now shall a month devour them with their portions. Let's bow for word of prayer. Father, we need to see you high and holy and lifted up. We need to have a better understanding of your mercy, your love, and your grace, but touch our hearts with your holiness and your justice. Help us to see you as worthy of honor and praise and glory and worship. So that when you appear, our hearts are glad to see you. And we are ushered into your presence with joy unspeakable and full of glory. Not as one who is standing before a father as a disobedient child, with fear and trembling, wondering what judgment is in store. If we learn anything from the nation of Israel, it's so easy to start down that slippery slope that leads to utter destruction by sin, to go astray, to seek other things that are not worthy of our affection verse 4, we have a sad state of affairs. And he starts off with this really interesting phrase that describes just how bad things have gotten in the nation of Israel. He says, they will not frame their doings. Then he goes on with the second part to say, to turn unto their God. And then he gives us a third phrase, for the spirit of whoredoms is in their midst. And the last phrase is just, the icing on the cake, and they have not known the Lord. We see a group that is unrestrained and unrepentant. That's what the first half of the verse is talking about. We will not frame. When you frame a picture, why do you frame a picture? You define the borders of the picture. And when you look at a picture, it kind of tells your eye where to focus and what to look at. If you pour milk out on the table, it's unrestrained. It's not bordered. If you spill water on the floor, where does it go? It runs until it sees its own level. But if you build a boundary like a swimming pool, you can put a lot of water in it and it just stays there. It doesn't go anywhere. I understand evaporation. Big kids splashing it out, but you've created boundaries for it, so it has to stay there. And one of the things that I love about Genesis is when he talks about God controlling the boundaries of the ocean. And I know that when hurricanes come, you have the great swell that floods cities, and I know that tsunamis can overflow those borders. But if you think about the power of the water that is in the ocean, and yet it is restrained because God says you shall go no farther. And so it goes no farther until he allows it to happen. The opposite is pictured here. We're talking about folks who know no boundary to their sin. There is nothing that draws them back and says, I shouldn't be doing this. There's no shame in what they're doing that says, maybe I should act differently, maybe I should speak differently, maybe I should think differently. Well, we're talking about a phrase here that belies a habit of evil that has absolutely no restraint. Turn with me to Jeremiah chapter 13, verse 23. Because Jeremiah was familiar with this and shared the same sin. In Jeremiah 13:23, he poses a question. Can the Ethiopian change his skin? No, it's absolutely natural to him. Or the leopard his spots? No, because it's absolutely natural to him. Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil. Do you see what he's asking here? They have become so accustomed to do evil, it would be as easy for a leopard to change his spots or the Ethiopian to have light skin instead of dark skin. You say neither one of those is going to happen. And God says, guess what? It's not natural for you to do good either. Because you're so natural at doing evil. What an incredible, biting indictment of the hardness and the sinfulness of a man's heart when he has unrestrained sin that runs rampant in his life. He uses another phrase in Hosea chapter 5. He says, they will not turn. They will not turn. Well, why is that such a big deal? Well, I don't know if you've ever had power steering go out on your vehicles, or if you've ever drove the older ones that did my father's. And his truck didn't have power steering at the time. It was challenging enough that it was stick shift, and I hadn't had much experience driving, let alone stick shift, and I was concentrating really hard on not stalling it or not flinging the people off that were trying to stack hay on the back of the truck. But rain was coming, and it was essential that we get it up. And so I put it in low gear, creeper, and it's barely moving along. And I thought, well, there's no way I can stall it here. And then we get to the end, and I'm just pulling with all my might trying to turn that thing. And it seemed like the more I pulled, the less that truck wanted to turn. It really fight you. No, we're spoiled nowadays because we jump in a vehicle and got power steering, and you just fall asleep at the wheel. It's so easy to turn. But it didn't used to be that way. I remember trying to break a draft horse. And I thought, well, this is going to be easier than breaking a riding horse because I'm not on it. I'm behind it. This is going to be fun. No. Because bigger horse, stronger will, massive muscles. And there you are pulling on the reins, trying to tell the horse to turn, and the horse, no, I don't want to. I was riding a horse at camp one time, and a girl was having an emergency, and I tried to rein the horse around to go back, and camp horses are interesting creatures. You get on them, they go out the gate, they're head to tail, they just follow their little path, they get back to the thing, and they're like, get off, I'm done, I did my thing. But I had to go back and help this girl because she's fallen off the horse. I didn't want her to get hurt. I bent the head of that horse all the way around until his nose was touching my leg. And that stupid horse was still walking in a straight line. So I reached down, grabbed it by the ear, and twisted as hard as I could. And finally, okay, I'll do what you want me to do. Can you imagine the picture here as God sees the nation of Israel just bent on heading for disaster? And he's pulling on the reins for all he is. And the nation of Israel, under the judgment, they've got their head turned all the way. He's grinding on their ear. And they are still walking in a straight line, heading straight towards trouble. God says, there's no repentance. There's no consideration of what I'm trying to tell you. There is no respect for my word. There is no listening to my prophets. Their heart is hardened. You say, how hardened can the human heart get? Go to Romans chapter 2 and verse 5. Romans 2:5 says, but after thy hardness and impenitent heart, treasurest up unto thyself wrath against the day of wrath, and revelation of the righteous judgment of God. You ever wondered, man alive, how is God justified? And we'll get into that tonight with all of the later chapters, the middle of the later chapters of Revelation, where it's just horrible judgment after horrible judgment after horrible judgment. Right here's the answer. They have stored up through their hard and impenitent heart, and God's righteous judgment is about to be revealed. And that's exactly what he's telling the group here in Hosea. He's saying, do you not understand that at some point mercy and grace have to stop? And justice and judgment have to take over? And still, with unrepentant heart, you continue to stubbornly march towards the consequences of sin. Go back to Hosea, if you will. Not only are they unrestrained and unrepentant, but the last half of the verse, he talks about just how corrupt they are. And it's a sad, sad state of affairs. He starts off by saying that they are corrupt absolutely to the core. Look at what he says. For the spirit of whoredoms is in the midst of them. Now, the spirit of whoredoms, when the Bible talks about the spirit, it's talking about the core. It's talking about the very makeup of us. So what he's talking about is their mind, their emotions, their thoughts, their values, their attitudes, their inclinations. Everything about them is this spirit of whoredom, adultery and idolatry, fixed on sin. They are not reasonable. You cannot reason with them. They will not consider anything else because they are fixed on sin. And gang, I got to tell you, the thing that probably concerns me the most is to see this happening in our country. You go and you try to talk to somebody. I remember when I was a teenager and you'd be doing evangelism and they'd listen to you. They'd consider what you had to say. They'd let you pray with them. Maybe they'd even come back later and have another conversation with you. But more and more and more, when you run into folks and you're trying to share the word of God with them, they don't even want to listen. They don't care. They don't care. And it's simply because anything that sounds or looks like it's going to get in the way of their sin, no. No consideration of it. You could bring every fact from science and lay it out before somebody. It could be just as obvious as the nose on your face, and they do not care. That's what he's talking about right here. That's where the nation of Israel is. Doesn't matter if it's homosexuality. Listen, God rained fire and brimstone down on 5 cities in the plain of Mamre. And we still have homosexuality today. And it's getting as rampant as it was back then. We're not even close to as bad as it was back then, but we're a lot farther along than we were 10 years ago. Bent. Absolutely determined. They are fixed on sin. You could tell the homosexual movement, do you realize that you can't reproduce, and therefore in one generation, if everybody was homosexual, we would cease to exist? Do you think they would care? You can have AIDS epidemic come in like it did in the 70s and 80s and 90s and wipe out thousands of them, and they won't even stop the bathhouses in San Francisco until the government steps in and makes them. You want to know how hard the heart can get? The heart can get so hardened to sin that that's all that it really cares about. And God says that's where the nation of Israel is. So bent on their idolatry, so not even considering anything Hosea has to say. No inkling of the Word of God anywhere around. They don't care for it at all. But he goes on and he says it's in the midst of them. What's in the midst of them? Well, their religion's in the midst of them. Their politics are in the midst of them. Their examples and their heroes are in the midst of them. Their families, their schools, their courts, their workplace, the news, and their heart is in the midst of them. And God says this isn't some kind of a social problem that we can throw some money at. Look, this is cancer of the soul. It's cancer of the society. And they're bound and determined to follow it. He finishes out the verse with the phrase, and they have not known the Lord. This is referring to willingly ignorant of him. They never rightly knew him to begin with, but they don't even like the misconception of him, so they choose to forget and ignore him. You say, how does God respond when the nation of Israel gets so bad off? Well, he's going to call the witnesses to the stand. Go back with me to chapter 3. In the beginning, he says, I know Ephraim, and Israel is not hid from me. You say, who does he call to the stand? He calls himself to the stand. God knows the sin. Now, the reason we did what we did is because of this right here. What about it? In verse 4, he knows the bounds of their sin, how bad off it is. In verse 5, he knows the pride of it. They're flaunting it. In verse 6, he knows the empty finding of when they try to seek him because everything else has failed. So this is almost like Paul walking in and he sees the Greeks and he sees these statues everywhere and he says, we have a statue of the unknown God. Let's cover all the bases and make sure. We really don't believe in Jehovah anymore, but just in case, let's throw Jehovah a few sacrifices. In verse 13, he knows the hypocrisy of it. If you jump down and read verse 13, he brings judgment in. Instead of turning to God for salvation, they go to an ungodly king and they try to buy his favor so that he will come and help them out. He knows the motives and the hearts in verse 7, and he knows the outcome at the end of verse 7. A month, and they will be devoured. God knows. God knows everything. But just in case you don't get it, he throws in the phrase, hey, you think you are hid from me? He knows their true character no matter how they try to disguise it. He knows their secret wickedness, no matter how deep they have tried to conceal it. You say, why does God know? In our evening services, we have been going over just finished the 7 letters to the churches. There is a phrase that appears over and over and over again to those 7 churches. I know thy works. And every single time he says that phrase, he reveals a portion of himself to back it up. Listen, this isn't just anybody telling you I know. We have looked at the fact that he reveals himself as the omniscient one that is all-knowing. We've looked at him as the person standing there with the eyes of fire that burn away the dross and all the worthless stuff, and the only thing that's left is what's valuable in his sight. We have seen him as a man standing there like feet of brass, tromping out the opposition before him. We have looked at him and saw him called the true and faithful. We've seen him called the Amen. So be it, because who could prevent it anyway? And God is standing in his courtroom as all of those things that he reveals to the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, and he says, I know Ephraim. And what you've been doing is not hid from me. But then look at verse 5. He calls their pride to testify. And this is a very, very interesting verse. I spent several hours on this verse this week. I was trying to figure out, is he talking about himself as the pride of Israel? Or is he talking about their pride? And I think he's talking about both. Because he's calling to the stand their false pride. And he's revealing what should have been their true pride himself. And how far away they have drifted. Go to 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 16. 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 16. There's a man here that has skewered the king. And David said unto him, Thy blood be upon my head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. What he's doing here is he is saying the false pride of the nation of Israel is testifying against yourself. To get this point a little better, go to Luke chapter 19, verse 22. Luke chapter 19, verse 22. He said, Out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid not down, and reaping that I did not sow. The parable of the man giving 3 servants, and one of them went and hid it in the ground, the other 2 reaped some. And he says, out of your own mouth. If you won't listen to the testimony of anyone else, if you won't listen to my testimony when I tell you you should have and could have done better, listen to your own testimony, because your actions testify against you. We don't have time to turn there, but in Proverbs 16:18 and 18:12 and in Jeremiah 6:15, all 3 references are about the nation of Israel being proud of their sin. And God says, it is a testament to my face. How can you deny when you look back at your life? If I were to rewind the film and put it up in the starry skies on an overhead projector, how in the world could you deny the inevitable consequences of sin? But I want you to go to the book of Amos. Because I believe also he's talking about himself here. Because he is supposed to be their pride. In Amos chapter 8, verse 7, it says, The Lord hath sworn by the excellency of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of thy works, any of their works. Now, when God swears by something, what does he swear by? Does he ever swear by the good of man? No. because all our righteousness is as filthy rags. So go back to chapter 6, verse 8, and it'll make a lot more sense to you. The Lord God hath sworn by himself, saith the Lord God of hosts, I abhor the excellency of Jacob, and hate his palaces. Therefore will I deliver up the city with all that is therein. Now you see why I've spent hours on this week. How in the world, in chapter 6, verse 8, can he say, I hate the excellency of Jacob, and then he turns around 2 chapters later and he says, I swear by the excellency of Jacob? Well, are you schizophrenic? Obviously not. So what is he saying? He is saying, I can swear by the true excellency of Jacob, which is myself, but boy, I hate the excellency of Jacob the way you portray it. Jesus fought this all the time when he was here. He would tell them, man, y'all are filthy. You're like whitewashed sepulchres. You're like vipers. You're like, and can you not see the self-righteous folks standing there? We are sons of Abraham. That's supposed to be the excellency of Jacob. Do you see? I am a Jew. We have temple. We have priests. We're the chosen ones. And Jesus Christ is sitting there saying, you are filthy scum. See, they are so proud of their ancestors, and they're so proud of their temple, and they're so proud of the fact that they're the chosen nation. But God says, wait a second, what's the common denominator in all those things that you're proud of? God himself. After all, why would you have a temple without him? Why do you have a priesthood without him? What chosen people are you without him? What are your forefathers among anybody else's forefathers if it isn't for God coming down and swearing by himself and making a covenant with himself to do these things for Abraham? Do you see what he's saying? He says, your pride testifies against you. Your false pride and what you think of yourselves as a nation and your true pride, me, are both testifying that you are absolutely rotten to the core. You say, what are the results? Go back to Hosea chapter 5, verse 1. For those of you that like to do things decently and in order, I'll put you out your misery this morning. The parts that we skip. Starting in verse 1, is a little phrase that says, for judgment is toward you. This is a really interesting phrase. I dug into this word and looked it up. It's mishput. Probably didn't say it right, but it's all right. It literally means a judicial verdict. Now you remember, we're in God's courtroom. And here he is, and in chapter 4, he has been telling us all of the things where they have sinned. And what he does is he starts chapter 5, is he says, hear you the priests, and hear you the house of Israel, and give ear, king. Everybody, listen up. What is he going to do? He's going to read the verdict. And then he's going to turn around and he's going to go back and he's going to rehash the sentence and why he got here. And as he goes through these verses we've been studying, and that's the reason it's broken up. Because in verse 1, he's going to talk about consequences. And then he's going to go down in verse 5, and then he's almost reading as if, you are filthy, rotten to the core. So guess what's going to happen to you? You have the spirit of whoredoms in you. So guess what's going to happen to you? You've set a net and you've done. So guess what's going to happen to you? And then when he gets down to 7 through 14, he stops with and it's just straight verdict. This is what's coming. You will not change, and you can't stop it. Can you imagine the silence in the courtroom? Could you imagine all of a sudden the fear and the awe that would grip your heart as you finally, for the first time, realize that you stand absolutely guilty before a holy God? The evidence is obvious. here is the verdict, and the judge is about to speak. He is about to sentence. But what really breaks my heart about this phrase is it's not a blessing. Go back to Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 28. I thought about not taking the time to do this morning because I realized we're not going to get through all of it. But Deuteronomy chapter 11, verses 26 through 28, this is what God wants for them. And Hosea chapter 5 is what he has to give them, not what he wants to give them. Starting in verse 26, he says, "Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord your God. But turn aside out of the way which I command you this day to go after other gods which ye have not known." You say, big deal. What's the blessing and what's the curse? It really doesn't say. Yes, it does. He just does it in a different section because it takes a little bit more time. Go to chapter 28 of Deuteronomy. Verses 1 through 14 is the blessing. And then 15 through 68 is the curse. And I got to tell you, we're going to read this and then we're going to quit. Because I'm going to have to go home and take a bath. It just drives me crazy reading 15 through. I mean, it does. It makes me start itching, and you'll see when we get there. What happens if you follow? What does he really want to be able to do for the nation of Israel? Verses 1 through 14. I'm going to read quickly. "And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently," important word, "unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, and the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessings upon thee in thy storehouses, and in all that thou settest thine hand to do. And he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. The Lord shall establish thee a holy people unto himself, as he has sworn unto thee. If thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God, and walk in his ways. And all the people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of thee. And the Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, and the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy ground, in the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open unto thee his good treasure, the heaven, to give the rain unto the land in his season, and to bless all the work of thine hand. And thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail. And thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath. If that thou hearken unto the commandment of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day, to observe and to do them. And thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee this day, to the right hand or to the left, or to go after other gods to serve them. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like prosperity gospel in the right sense to me. How in the world would you not want that? I'm going to bless you if you're inside. I'm going to bless you if you're outside. I'm going to bless you when you go in the way. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless your cattle. I'm going to bless your sheep. I'm going to bless your storehouse. Man alive. I don't know what kind of blessing on a storehouse you have to have, but if stuff is bountiful in the storehouse, it sounds pretty good. I'm going to make people to be afraid of you. You're going to be the head and never the tail. You're always going to be above and never below. You're going to be, you're going to be, you're going to be, you're going to be. Listen, when God loves you, that's the way he wants to treat you. The problem is, do you love him so that he can treat you that way? Say, God bless America. I wish God could bless America. But if God's going to bless America, then America needs to see God. You can't depart to the right hand, you can't depart to the left hand, you can't have any other gods before him. And if we do, then Because if I'm going to depart from the right hand to the left hand, then what possible reason do I have to expect God's blessing in my life? And we are so bent to go astray in sin. So what happens when we do go astray in sin? Again, I'm going to read quickly. Almost wish I had mouthwash up here. But it shall come to pass that if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Now, listen. 14 verses of blessing. 3 times that about the curse. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, in all that thou settest thine hand for to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with consumption, and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew. And they shall pursue thee until thou perish. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thy feet shall be iron. You're not going to have rain, you're not going to have productive crops. The Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Thy carcass shall be meat unto the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. The Lord will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. Are you scratching yet? Makes my skin crawl. The Lord shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart, and thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long. Tell you what, if it doesn't nail you in the gut when he starts talking about your boys and your girls. And there shall be no might in thine hand. The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be oppressed and crushed always. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. The Lord shall smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy foot unto the top of the head. The Lord shall bring thee and thy king which thou hast set over thee unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, and there shalt thou serve other gods, wood and stone. Thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but a little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine olive shall cast his fruit. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. All thy trees and the fruit of thy land shall a locust consume. The stranger that is within thee shall get up over thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearken not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. They shall be upon thee for a sign and a wonder, and upon thy seed forever, because thou servest not the Lord thy God with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until they have destroyed thee. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. A nation of fierce countenance shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. He goes on all the way down through verse 68. Do you get it? Do you get it? You tell me our country doesn't have botch and itch and... It's the inevitable consequences of sin. And God is standing in his courtroom and he says, I call myself to the witness stand and I call your bride to the witness stand. You are